morning, everyone. This is Beilui Nishmat Ishti Aliza Faiza Bat Yosef Naim Salima. Now, we come to Shabbat morning. Now, Shabbat morning has a different type of holiness, entirely different from the night before. Remember, it's divided into 3 parts. And here we come to the part which connects us to the Bereshit, right at the beginning, the whole story of Genesis, the beginning of the world, and how each day developed as it moved on. And that's our connection. And the connection also, obviously, we receive the Torah. Receiving the Torah is like Olam Haba. And that's the feeling we have to be in the time of Mashiach. And that's one of the reasons why it's different. And here you have Shlomo HaMelech is described in the Talmud and by Rashi that he represents HaMelech. Shlomo HaMelech, HaMelech Elyon, Hashem. And he is the groom. And the bride is the Shechina. The Shechina is the female eminence. And also the representative of the women in the Jewish world. And in fact, in the whole world, the mother of everybody. And she, and also Shabbat, is also the bride. That's why we say, Boi Kala, Nusucha, Boi Kala. We're talking about the Shabbat as well as the Shechina. So, and Am Yisrael, the whole people of Israel. And we have to imagine she's dressed in a white dress. And just like any bride, she's kept waiting a little bit by her groom. And she says, where's my soulmate? My soulmate, I mean, every day of the week in Bereshit has a soulmate. And on each day it says exactly who is connected with them. Where's mine? And Hashem said, I'm giving you Shabbat and Yisrael. They are your soulmates. And that's how the relationship has got to be with us, very deep and very understanding. Now, we're told a story which has a significance to what I'm talking about. And that is the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov was praying on Shabbat, and he found himself going up to the highest of heights, being the Baal Shem Tov much higher than the angels went. And there in heaven he sees 2 golden thrones. And he asked, who are they for? And they said, one is for you, and the other one you must go and find him. And so he came down. It was Friday. He got his driver, and they took out the carriage, and they rode and rode and rode and rode. He didn't know where. Remember, like Avram Avinu, on the way I will show you where you're going. Anyway, he came to a village, and the village was no Jews. He hunted around, couldn't see a Jew in the street. So he finally came to a little tumble-down house just outside, very modest house just outside of town. And he was already nearly Shabbat, and he had his food with him, ready to go. So he knocked on the door, and he says, look, excuse me, I'm far from home. Can I come and stay with you for Shabbat? And he was welcomed in, and he noticed, by the way, no mezuzah on the door, no kippah on the man's head, no sign of being Jewish, but he welcomed him, and he gave him a beautiful room and accommodated the horses as well as his followers, and they all came in the house. Then it comes to Friday night. He made it very, very quick. And they ate quickly. And of course, it wasn't kosher. So Baal Shem Tov ate his food. And they sang and they danced and they went. He said, look, you'll have to excuse me. I have a big party tonight for my friends. So next door he had a big room. And he goes in. His friends are waiting for them. And they hear him. They hear them singing and dancing. And of course, non-Jewish songs. Nothing to do with not in Hebrew, not in Yiddish, not in anything that's recognizable. But still, he went through Shabbat. What could he do? He was already there. And if he had ordered to go, then he was there, and he will see how it develops. Anyway, in the afternoon, the same thing. He had to do everything by himself, finished his last food, and now it came after Shabbat to go. Of course, this young man didn't even know what Kiddush was, and so Baal Shem Tov made Kiddush. And then he went to him and he says, tell me, what was the big party about last night? He says, look, I came from an irreligious family. They were religious before the war, but during the war, I lost my parents when I was only 5. And later on, I was captured by bandits and I was brought here to this place. And they said, if you move, we'll kill you. You have to live amongst the Christians and you have to be brought, you're a Christian now. And that's how I've been brought up. But my father said two things to me. Always remember you're a Jew. Always remember Shabbat. That's all I can tell you. And of course, being a little boy, I didn't remember anything else, nothing at all. But I did remember I'm a Jew, did remember Shabbat. So comes Friday night, I make a big party for my friends. We sing and we dance and we celebrate Shabbat. I'm not very rich. During the week, I save up the best things that I can find to make sure that Friday night has a special honor. And we drink, not kosher, but he didn't say not kosher, but it was obviously not kosher. Very expensive wine, and they have really a party, and they give each other's gifts, and that's how I celebrate. Baal Shem Tov is so taken aback, the way, the sincerity the man was keeping Shabbat really, and that he was saving up everything for during the week for that big honor, like any good Jew should do. And here he was, and he was about to ask him, listen, this is very beautiful, but let me tell you how to really celebrate. And a little voice came in his head. And he says, we warned you, you have to be wise. Don't, and Baal Shem Tov found he couldn't speak. Don't speak. You will destroy him. You will shatter him. He all the time thought that this was the way to keep Shabbat. Leave it alone because you might lose him. And so he gave him a hug. He thanked him very much and he went home. The next night he had a dream, and there he was up. He now was moved to Gehenna, to hell. And there in Gehenna, of course, all dark and noise, and, he wasn't comfortable there. He didn't think he'd ever get there. But obviously, the angel with him, he says, I just want to show you what goes on here. And he took him and he saw two burnt-out thrones. And he says, who are they for? And they said, well, one is for you, and the other one you have to find. And if you're unwise, that's where you're going to sit. So off he goes. Came Friday, he saddled up the wagon and they start riding, again not knowing where they're going, and they arrived at a very big town, a lot of Jews, a big yeshiva, Talmud Torah, synagogues, very, very thriving Jewish community. And he went to visit the Rav, who recognized Baal Shem Tov, and he says, can I stay here for Shabbat? The man did not say a word, but he let him in. He came in and he carried on learning. And Baal Shem Tov had to sit there and wait for him. Then he got up, showed him his room, showed the room for the others, told his servants, give them food, and came Friday night. He went with him to synagogue. The rabbi didn't talk to him, nothing at all. On the way, it was silent, it was somber. At the synagogue, the rabbi didn't. That's it. When they came home Friday night, the wife and children all sat round the table. It was obvious to the Baal Shem Tov they were scared to speak. And the father, he kept on shouting, you can't go outside because you might step on an ant and kill it, or you might knock a twig off and break it, and you're not allowed to play outside. You have to be in the house. You have to learn. That's all you have to do. And they wouldn't allow them to do anything at the table. They sat there silently, and he saw they were scared. Anyway, that's how the whole Shabbat was. There was no change. Comes in the evening to Havdalah, and he decides he's got to speak to him. And because the man's a great rabbi, and you could see who he was, and yet that's how he behaved. Baal Shem Tov wanted to say something, and he couldn't speak. And in his head came a voice, be careful, Baal Shem Tov, don't be unwise. This man has explained to you that he's frightened of Lashon Hara, that's why he doesn't speak. He doesn't go out because he's frightened of breaking a twig or killing an ant. He's frightened of Chilul Shabbat. All of these things is a fear with him all the time and everything that he does. And he really believes that he's being a good Jew. But all I wanted to do was ask him, why are you treating your wife and children like that? At least give them simcha. But he said, I don't allow them to sing. I don't allow because they have to concentrate on the atmosphere of Shabbat. And he told him, don't be unwise. And he didn't say a word. And he went home. Because that rabbi was thinking that that is the way you keep Judaism. That's how way you keep the laws. But what do we learn from this? As Baal Shem Tov lived, we learn Shabbat is not around strict laws. The most important thing is loving and being happy with your family and with your children, making them feel good. Tell them to give a Dvar Torah. Tell them to go out and play. Make them feel easy. Don't let them hate our religion, as unfortunately an enormous number in this generation that has happened to them after what they've seen. And it's a very, very sad thing. But usually it's the parents, grandparents, or the grandchildren, or the teachers who have put them in that position, and the rabbis. I'm not blaming them. Most of the rabbis are very, very good. Most of the parents are very, very good. However, an enormous amount have made that big mistake in education, whilst thinking that is way a Jew should be. So you have the wise and the unwise. He chose the wise, and of course he's in Shemayim, right? But we must always remember in our life there's a big difference between the wise and the otherwise. Let's none of us be otherwise. Now, we have to have no boundaries to our happiness and simcha on Shabbat, and no boundaries on our dancing and singing and loving each other and spending time telling stories and listening to what's going on during the week for each member of the family. And now I wanted to share with you a personal story which will give a feeling of what I am talking about. Many years ago, I controlled a public company in Switzerland. We had a major project in Ethiopia. I took investors over to Ethiopia to see for themselves. And we took around about 100 people went. And there we went around. We were very impressed with the factory. We were very impressed with everything that was going on. It was big. It was 5,000 hectares, which is very, very big. And we were growing. Unfortunately, I've forgotten the name of the plant. It'll come back to me in a minute, and you'll see why. And we were growing that to produce biofuels for aircraft. And it was successful. And then we're going around, and then one of the directors there said to me, I'm not a director really, he was in charge of the whole project there, and he said to me, look, we're having a big celebration because the plant is open. We're bringing the press and important government ministers, mainly from Germany, because the public company was registered in Germany, and we're going to, and of course the president, the prime minister over here, we've all fixed it. I said, what date? Gave me the date, and I looked in shock. I said, but it's Shabbat. How can you do it? It's Shabbat. He says, but this is not a Jewish company, it's a public company. I said, yeah, but I control the shares. And you know very well that our agreement is we only can have Shomer Shabbat. You're not allowed to work on Shabbat. So he says, I thought that you meant working on Shabbat. This is not working, we're celebrating. So I said, well, you have to change it. He says, I can't do that. The president, the prime minister, none of them will, it's their schedules. I said, if you explain why, you will see that they will change. Well, he didn't explain why. Now, I was with some of the other directors and, of course, with the investors who were all religious, by the way. And we went away because didn't want to be there Shabbat anyway. So we went away, home of Shabbat, and Shabbat afternoon, I had a dream. My dream was the whole scenery of Yonah. Remember, Yonah went to the city of Nineveh, and he had said to Hashem, you'll forgive them and you'll forget about it. And he went to the city of Nineveh, and he went, and of course he asked him to go. And then outside he sat under a tree. Now I've forgotten the name of the tree, but that is the same thing as what we were growing over there. And what's it in English? And then what did he do? He sat down, and of course it was fine, and he enjoyed it, and the sun was shining, and he got hotter and hotter, and suddenly it died. And he said to Hashem, what have you done to me? He said, just like it grew overnight, and you didn't do anything, and that I took it back. And then I saw the message that you didn't make a stand for Shabbat, and whatever the growth has been of the company, which was quite phenomenal at the time, it's going to be, I can just take it back as well because everything's in my hands. Well, we were there. A few days later, I go to a board meeting, and of course, they pretended I knew. And then I found what had happened was suddenly a disease had hit the whole crop, and each area of land had a canal in between. It's never happened before. It spread right across all the growth. All the growth. We lost the year. Of course, the shares crashed because of that. Of course, they recovered afterwards, but for that moment they did. And here, we all lost a lot of money out of it. Lost a lot of money. Although it was paper money, nevertheless, it was money. And I thought to myself, look, I did not insist enough, but the law is that a public company that is owned mainly by non-Jews, not mainly, I was controlled by me, but by a lot of non-Jews, even if it's only 20%, it doesn't have to keep the laws of Shabbat, although I insisted that Shabbat, they wouldn't work. And I'm not allowed to interfere. And so what happened was, here, we'd had a big loss and it was gone. And we learned from this, and I told them, I said, look, we were all there, we all heard it. We all made a joint decision, but we were wrong. And years later, I went to see the Steipler Rebbe, really a grand sage, and he was 93, and my colleague and I were sitting, he was the financial director, about 3 in the morning in his house, and then he turned around to me, and so we said, look, we have this problem, we have a responsibility. What do we do? And we feel that, after all, we were in charge, although they participated. So he said, he thinks and thinks, and he says, the problem is that it's Maaseh. I said, but we were very careful always to give Maaseh. We gave more. We calculated every single week. So he says, I'm not talking about you. There's such a thing as money laundering. I said, we're not doing money laundering. He says, if any investor has money in there where he never paid Maaseh, that gets mixed in with all the other money, and it makes it all not good. Tameh. I was quite surprised. And then Yaakov said, yes, but we feel that it's so important for us to do this. And he said, are you a Navi, a Ben Navi? Are you a prophet? Are you the son of a prophet? How do you know what's going on and how Shabbat, Kadosh Baruch Hu runs this world? He says, you don't know. Each one of those, they have their cheshbon, their dealings with Hashem. That it affects everybody else. Therefore, we have to learn to be extremely careful what money we take, extremely careful on the decisions we make. And I should have taken that chance because I knew, had I announced that I was withdrawing from the company and selling my shares, the shares would have crashed. They crashed anyway. And at Shabbat, Hashem taught me a very, very strong lesson on that. So we take all the combination of what we learned, what is special about Shabbat morning, and it should go into our hearts. Since then, it went deeper into my heart. I really realized that I hadn't taken it inside properly, and that we should always be careful who we are dealing with, who are our partners, how they behave. We don't want them to be religious. Nobody's asking them to be religious. That's not fair. It can be non-Jewish as well. But who is he? What is he? How does he behave? Because he has his mazal and you have your mazal. And his mazal might be very different from yours. And he can pull down whatever you've got. Never go into partnership. If you do, know them. Be very, very careful. Always remember in your head that be wise, not otherwise. Number one. Number two, always have Shabbat and Kedusha in mind. Number three, be careful of who is your partner because you could be dragged down by his mazal. And that's what I learned from this. We all should learn from this. And naturally, my bracha is, as we say in the morning tefillah, please Hashem help me. Help me to avoid Adam Ra, an evil person, Shachen Ra, a bad neighbor. I'm adding in Shutaf Ra, a bad partner, whether it's marrying them or something else, or dealing with them. It affects our mazal. We should all be blessed. We will be able to overcome our inner desires and add to our life and only bring blessings on ourselves and our whole family. Have a wonderful day.